The first third party has arrived in Onigashima. In fact, they've been invited to the party. CP-0'S, the strongest intelligence in the world. So, what is their mission? Well, originally they were here to make a deal. We actually saw them earlier talking to Orochi in the beginning of the arc, and at that point they were trying to make a deal for some weapons, and Orochi was asking for Dr. Vegapunk. They said, no, that's ridiculous, you're crazy. Orochi then shot one of them in the face, and we thought that was the end of that. But no, instead they've actually been invited to this party on Onigashima. So does that mean Vegapunk is coming to Wano? Personally, I do think so, and there's other reasons tying to this like Tashigi and Sentomaru, so I'll probably break that down in a separate video. But the fact that the CP-0 are in Onigashima through an invitation really hammers home the belief for me that Vegapunk is going to come, because I really don't see a scenario where Orochi's like, okay, you could think about it, come to the party, enjoy, have some drinks, and then sleep on the offer, and then maybe we can negotiate. But enough about Orochi, because right now he's supposedly dead and looks like the CP-0 are over him. The deal should be called off at this point because Orochi is dead and Kaido definitely has no interest in working with the world government. He's trying to take over the world, find ancient weapons, and get the One Piece. So it's very interesting that the CP-0 are still here in Onigashima despite this massive war breaking out and them having no deals in place. So they have to have another role that they will act on later. I don't see them at this point just leaving the battle, especially after Oda showcased them. So as of right now, they're definitely not going to get involved and try to intervene in this battle, but after the battle is over, there's many things that they could do. And to really break that down, we have to look at what their motivations are. One thing that's been really interesting is how much they want these weapons from Orochi. See, right now Wano is being used essentially as a factory. They're using the great blacksmiths of Wano to create these super advanced weapons. It's just that before they had Doflamingo, the underworld boss Joker, as the middleman. But even though now that Doflamingo has been taken out, they still go directly to Orochi to get the deal done. So why exactly are they after these weapons so much? Especially when they're the world government, and honestly they could probably produce those weapons themselves. Well, so far from what we've seen, they're really using these weapons to hide their identity. As the revolutionaries discovered in Dressrosa, these weapons were being used to aid wars throughout the world, and the world government obviously didn't want that to track back to them. So based off of that, they were definitely using those weapons to weaken opposition and start wars to just make people weaker in general, so they would have to rely on the world government. At the same time, Orochi says something interesting where he says you're using these weapons to fight pirates. Now, does that mean they're using these weapons to give to other nations to fight off pirates? Or they could be just preparing for a large war themselves. And we've actually gotten some hints of that during the reverie. One of which was the Gorosei saying we need to start another great cleansing. On top of that, you had them asking Imu what light needed to be erased. Now, the light to be erased part might be referring to a single person, so I won't get too deep into those theories. But looking at the overall situation, the world government is definitely preparing to grab more power and take out some opposition. They might have already taken action with whatever they're doing in Alabasta. Meanwhile, you got the Supernova taking on two Yonko who have just allied, so the balance of powers are starting to spiral, and the world government definitely recognizes that. There's gonna be a battle of the thrones coming up, and they're definitely prepared for that, seeing how they just abolished the warlord system, and not only that, but they actually went after the warlords themselves. So I do think they're looking at the overall situation and are definitely trying to capitalize on this and get more power. So what are some possible options of what they could do? Well, the first one that could pop in your head is that they could just try to take over Wano and essentially gain control of the factories and the weapons. And honestly, if the Supernova and the Yonko kind of take each other out and wear each other out, they could definitely swoop in and do that. At the same time, in the long term, that is just not realistic. The country of Wano is still full of these very strong samurai that would definitely rebel. On top of that, you gotta realize like the only reason Wano was under Orochi's control was because Kaido dedicated all his powers here. The world government can't afford to dedicate that amount of power to try to suppress Wano. Even if they're trying to use Wano for its factories, they still need the manpower from Wano to create those weapons. So them trying to take control of Wano is just not realistic. What's much more realistic though is something we've seen them do before, which is a buster call. Now you might be wondering why exactly would they buster call Wano, the place they're getting all their weapons? Well, while these weapons are definitely important to them, the main thing for them is keeping their identity identity safe. They really just don't want the rest of the world to find out they're purchasing weapons from pirates. And that's exactly what's gonna happen by the end of this battle when Luffy defeats Kaido. So what they could do instead is, after the dust has settled, both sides have worn out, they decided to come in and just wipe this place out. And ironically, it kinda has some historical context as well. See, Wano is based off of Japan when it was in isolation, and what caused Japan to open up was the United States pulling up with a bunch of battleships. Well, in the case of Wano, it's kind of the opposite. The people of Wano want to open the borders, the world government doesn't want it to. So maybe you have a buster call coming in with a bunch of battleships, just like what happened in real life, but instead it's to try to keep Wano's borders closed. Another thing to consider is that they don't really know a lot about Wano, and they definitely fear its power and how strong the samurai are. And the CP-0 are definitely witnessing that firsthand by seeing how many beast pirates the Samurai Alliance has taken out. So I do think a buster call is definitely an option here, and if that's actually the case, the Straw Hats are not going to be able to deal with it because they should be absolutely drained. But obviously at that point, Wano's not just going to get wiped out, so some external forces could definitely come. We'll get into that a little more later, because there are some other options of what the CP-0 could be after. Another obvious mission they could have is getting the road poneglyph, something that leads to Laugh Tale. If they could get their hands on that, they could prevent a pirate king from being born, essentially. So I could definitely see them going after that, but again, I don't think they will be successful with it. By the end of this battle, I expect Kaido to be defeated, and Luffy definitely has to get that road poneglyph from Kaido. If the world government manages to take this and then Luffy now has to go chase them down and then go and find another one, that's just so much that has to happen, and Oda's been talking about how the story will wrap up pretty soon. So although I do think the CP-0 could go after the road poneglyph, I don't think they're going to be successful, and I'll probably just set up a clash between the Straw Hats and the CP-0. Another thing they could be after is actually a Straw Hat, and that is Nico Robin, who everybody's after these days. If they can't steal the road poneglyph, why not just steal the person that could read it? Now personally, I've brought this idea up before in terms of Big Mom taking Robin, but I think that would make a lot more sense story-wise because it could lead you to Elbaf. The world government taking Robin though is kind of like Innie's lobby all over again, and once again, I don't really see the Straw Hats going to like Marijois after this or New Marineford. So this is another option where it's like they might try that, but they're not gonna succeed. Them going after Kaido's Devil Fruit could be possible as well, I guess, but at the same time, that's definitely not their main mission here, because they don't even believe right now that both Yonko could be taken out. So if they do go after Kaido's Devil Fruit, it's not gonna be like their main mission from the get-go. It's gonna be something like, oh my god, Kaido actually died, let's try to like snatch this up or something. So yeah, in terms of them coming in and stealing something, I either think they're not gonna be successful or they're gonna like try to steal it last minute and just leave. But we do have one more theory on how the CP-0 could be involved, and that is with Big Mom. I want to give a shout out to Bensei, who did a video on this and broke it all down, so check that out in the description below. But essentially the main point of the theory is that Big Mom did not eat those kids. Now when you first hear this, it sounds kind of crazy, but by looking at some of the kids that were in focus, they do look like some of the people we have seen so far. One kid with sunglasses and the scar on his forehead kind of looks like Dufeld from the underworld that was in Whole Cake Island. Another kid that is wearing a mask kind of has the same mask that one of the CP-0 uses. On top of that, one of the kids is also a long-armed tribe member, and one of the CP-0 members is a long-armed person as well. Also, some people have said this crazy looking girl is Stussy, which that one I don't see. Now you still might be saying this is kind of a stretch, but you do have to admit like some of these similarities are really similar. Then the next question is like, what exactly happened then if Big Mom did not eat them? Well, Big Mom still has Mother Caramel's fruit, so she definitely at the very least ate Mother Caramel. And Mother Caramel definitely isn't a person to be sacrificing herself for those kids, so the only scenario that makes sense to me would be her thinking she could overtake Big Mom, but in the end she failed. But then you have the question of like, how exactly did those kids become CP-0 members? And like, I guess you could say CP-0 was still around and then like took some of those kids in. The kid that looks like Dufeld in particular was like a kid sold into slavery, so maybe he broke out of there and became a member of the underworld by himself. I do gotta say, this idea is kind of a stretch and it relies on a lot of what if scenarios happening. It would make sense if some of these CP-0 members were former orphans like CP-9 members, and the idea that these guys were those kids that Big Mom almost ate and they could reveal the secret to Big Mom that she ate Mother Caramel, that would be a very impactful moment. I do feel like Big Mom has to figure that out eventually, and this is definitely one way to do it. And it could also be a way she gets defeated where she's just no longer in a right state of mind after hearing what happened. But personally, while this is a really good theory, I don't think it's the case. From what we saw with that scene scene of Big Mom and what we learned about like the giant that was there and being terrified, I just don't see how those kids would have survived. On top of that, even if those kids were these CP0 members, they don't know that telling Big Mom the truth would knock her out, or else they would have done that a long time ago. But yeah, I did want to bring this theory up because it's definitely not impossible. But overall for me, the CP0, I think they're either gonna go after an object like the road poneglyph or maybe even Robin, and that's gonna set up a clash and maybe a reveal of who they actually are. Either that happens or the other most likely option, which I think is the Buster Call. And like I said, if the Buster Call happens, the samurai are not gonna be able to hold them back and the Straw Hats are gonna be drained. So in that scenario, you really gotta be thinking like the Grand Fleet probably has to show up, and that's been speculated for a while because Luffy has been in a couple of near-death situations so far, and it would definitely be a great way to showcase the power of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. On top of that, them showing up would mean Leo and Sai showing up, which could lead to more information on the Reverie. And if I remember correctly, last time Bartolomeo was shown, he like destroyed a town that Shanks was ruling over. So that could lead to another thing as well. I definitely do miss the Grand Fleet, and them showing up in this situation would be pretty cool. A counter argument here though is Leo, last we saw him was with Pound back in Dressrosa. You would think he would probably already be on his way if he saw Luffy's Viver card burning up earlier. But at the same time, maybe they just had to bring Rebecca back really quick and then they were gonna head out. Or Luffy's about to get really close to death again in this battle. So to me, if the CP0 really act in full force after Wano and bring in a Buster Call, the Grand Fleet is the most likely option to show up. The Revolutionaries are an option as well, but they have so much on their plate right now. They just declared war on the world government, something happened to Sabo, they're not gonna worry about a supplier. And Vegapunk, while I do believe he's gonna show up, he's not gonna go directly against the world government. He might still be a good guy, but that's who he's working under right now. Oh, and one final note is that CP0 and Sword, they could be going up against each other, so maybe X-Drake's mission has something to do with them as well. And in regards to that girl that looked like Bao Huang, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bao Huang like I said in my chapter review, but clearly that girl is still in the crew of Who's Who, and as far as their relation to CP0 and the world government, I'll probably do a separate video on that very soon. But yeah, those are my thoughts on CP0 and what their role in Wano could be. But what about you guys? What do you think they're gonna do in Wano? What do you think their mission is? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please hit that like button. To keep up with the channel, you gotta hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to get notified. Thank you to all my King Pirates Elite members on YouTube and Patreon for supporting the channel. Be sure to follow me on Twitch. I'm DStreams. I watch the Wano anime there every Thursday. Follow me on Twitter. I'm DKing4, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.